exploring target tones. And this explanation of target tones is based on the framework which we discussed earlier. That's the TOBI, the tone and break indices, which is basically the method of describing an international pattern with an international phrase, right? So TOBI is showing us the tone and break indices within an international phrase, and the description is given on the basis of high and low pitch or pitches in a sentence, okay? And then we are representing those pitch changes with the help of fixed patterns which are given through the framework, right? Like in terms of the stressed high peak, or like what's the tonic accent, right? What's the phrase accent? And then what happens at the end? Like what's the state of the intonation at the boundary level, right? So these three things are given in this TOBI framework. And the phrase accent, pitch accent, and boundary, in addition to these things, we can also talk about some additional information if it happens to the earlier part of the international phrase before the tonic accent, right? So that's also one possibility. So applying this framework, which is called the TOBI, the tone and breaks indices, and that's a framework as already introduced to you, and it's a sentence, Amelia, and the environment is basically, this is the context, that it's an answer to a very simple statement or a question, that what's her name? So the interlocutors are basically talking about a person, and the question is that what's her name? And then the answer is Amelia, right? So this is the tone tier, because there are two tiers within this framework. One is called the tone tier, and the second is called the segmental tier, okay? Because segments are there. This is the second tier. And these are the segments because segments are given, Amelia, right? And these are the three, since it's a short sentence, right? So three informations are given, because before the peak, right? Before this tonic accent, which is tonic accent, that's an important point in tone or intonational analysis, that the tonic accent is high, right? And the asterisk is there, so it's the stressed one, right? So it's a high tonic accent. And then after this tonic accent, the phrase is, which is basically the phrase accent, it's low, right? This is the phrase accent, which is low. And then the end is like the boundary. This is given with the percentage sign, right? So it shows us the phrase boundary, the boundary of the international phrase, that what is happening at the boundary. And so the framework says, because this analysis says that it's again low and the falling one, basically. So this is one application of the TOBI framework on the explanation of the target tones. And let me give you some more examples. These are 4 more possibilities. Like when the same sentence is spoken, Amelia, but right now the context is that it's a question equivalent to, did you say Amelia? Right? This is the question. So it would be like, Amelia? Right? So when it's the same sentence, the toner, the tone tier, basically, it shows that it is, the accent tone is like low, right? It's the peak is low. And then after the accent, the peak, the remaining part of the phrase is high, right? And then the end is the boundary, basically. The boundary of the phrase is also rising, okay? So it's again high, right? And the segmental tier is also, segments are given here. Now in one more possibility, when Amelia is the same, sentence, and it is given in a context like addressing Amelia, indicating that it is her turn to speak, right? So when a person is just calling her by name, that, okay, Amelia, it's now your turn to speak, right? So Amelia. So again, you see there is a difference, okay? Because in the above sentence and in this one, the peak is like similarly the falling one, right? But this one, because now after the accent, the phrase accent, okay, after this, the tone is low, right? And then the boundary is again rising. So there is something to follow, right? Like in the shape of this one, when it is a question. This is, although it's not a question, but it's simply a request maybe, or a turn that, okay, you speak now. So there is the similarity of the boundary, because the boundary of both international phrases are the same. And it's this, point, which is called like the phrase accent. This phrase accent is low here. That's the difference. And two more possibilities, like Amelia, when a question indicating surprise. Amelia, right? So it's a surprise, exclamation, or like in the shape of interjection, okay? Amelia, right? So then in this case, this is basically the start is with low, right? And it is closely attached with the peak or the accent phrase, and the accent phrase is basically high. This asterisk shows that the accent of the phrase is high, but it is, closely attached to, preceded by this, l, which is low, okay? So the falling is rising, and the rising is the main accent of the phrase, right? And these two phrases are similar in other terms, okay? And then the last one is when it is a strong reaction or a reprimanding, right? A sort of sentence like Amelia is being reprimanded, right? In this case, what happens here is that these two are the same, right? But in this case, the boundary is also low. So in addition to the phrase accent, which is similar to the other one, but this last one is low. So these are the differences between these target tones, and it's a very useful method to explain and describe the international patterns within sentences.